All right, hello, and welcome to a webinar as we talk about some pretty important topics around energy storage with an emphasis on energy storage in Queensland. And an amazing collection of panelists today as we represent from the Queensland Decarbonisation Hub, which we'll share a little bit more in a moment. But to start off with, I do want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are all on. I'm coming to you live from the Yuggera country up here in Ipswich in Queensland, and I pay respect to elders, past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge any traditional custodians and First Nations people that are either on the webinar today or watching on the Zoom on the recording after. So by way of introduction, my name is Dr. Chad Renando. I'm heading up one of the themes for the Queensland Decarbonisation Hub, along with my co-facilitator here, Habib. And by way of introduction, the Queensland Decarbonisation Hub has three main focus areas, one of them being place and everything related to that geographic transition that's inherent to decarbonization. Second one around the environment and the environmental impact of the natural capital. And the third one around technology and innovation and what exactly that means. And Habib and I are heading up that particular third theme, that stream. And a lot of our emphasis is on mapping. And when we talk about mapping, we map the ecosystem of support for all the different technologies, the actual technology providers, and the policies that relate to it. And so one of the focus areas in one of our first webinars, we did have one previously on kind of general decarbonization technology overall. And now we're really starting to deep dive into specific technologies and the broad view of battery or energy storage, not just batteries. And as Catherine was commenting just before we kicked off, look, that is very broad, and even batteries is very broad. And so I'm very grateful for the incredible experts that we have, because while I have a very generalist view from a bird's eye approach on all things decarbonization technologies, the people here around the screen know all the infinite details around what exactly it means to store the energy and all the implications from value chain, supply chains, who can get involved, what the opportunities are. And that's part of the objective we have today, particularly for those who are attended. We had about 90 plus people register for this, so a very strong interest in this. And one of the big objectives here is not just to deliver content, but to let people know about what the opportunities might be and to connect with each other about those opportunities. So with that in mind, for those of you that are watching live, the chat is open, the Q&A is open. Please introduce yourselves, let us know who you are, where you're from. We do want this to be interactive. So Viv and I facilitate this conversation. We might be injecting some of your comments as we go through, inject your questions in there, and we'll have some more dedicated time, hopefully at the end, for Q&A. But please participate, get engaged, because if you're having a bit of a question or you see a bit of an opportunity, somebody else out there, not just on this webinar now, but in the recording later, may have the same thing, and we want to make sure that we give air to that. So what I might do is I might go around the room briefly, and I'll start with my co-facilitator, Habib. We can do a bit of an introduction and what he's doing within the Decarb Hub. But then we'll go around the room to each of you. Josh, maybe starting with you, then over to Reagan, and then over to Catherine. And just, a little bit about who you are, what you do, and a little bit around what your views are on the current state of energy storage, broad view within Australia and the context, but also specifically what that means for Queensland. But Habib, I might just start with you.
Oh, thank you so much, Chad, and my panelists for coming through this webinar. So my name is Dr. Habib, and I am working as a research fellow with the Rural Economy Centre of Excellence at the University of Southern Queensland, Toowoomba. And I am assisting Chad and the Queensland Decarbonisation Hub with mapping the decarbonization technologies and developing sort of the tool for building the collaboration and facilitating partnerships between different entities across the decarbonization technologies. So that's what I'm working on, and I can give you a bit of more information later in the webinar, like how we develop that tool and what sort of challenges I have and what sort of insights I can provide in that tool. Thank you, Chad.
Excellent. Thanks, Habib. So Joshua, maybe just to kick off as far as who you are, what you do, who you do it for, and what are we talking about energy storage? Like maybe just a bit of a very short summary on what it all means and where are we heading in Queensland?
Yeah, right. Thanks, Chad. Thanks for having me. So I'm Associate Professor Joshua Watts. I'm the Director of the Energy Storage Research Group at QT. So I've got about about 18 years or so experience under my belt in battery materials, production, scale up, research, development, as well as electrochemical testing, pack design, pack testing, power electronics, and deployment. So yeah, at QUT, we've got a few large projects currently running where we're supporting industry to build the supply chain to move towards eventually trying to manufacture batteries on continent to support demand. And that's a real big focus of our research and what we do is real world industry relevant research, really targeted at bridging the gaps and breaking down barriers that industry is facing to get products to market and get their products in place. So huge opportunity, and maybe I'll talk about in more detail about the opportunity later. But yeah, no doubt there's a massive opportunity for Australia and Queensland to participate in the battery supply chain. Huge demand overseas for the commodities. And we've obviously got a lot of the critical minerals on continent here. So there's a big opportunity for Australian industry to start value adding to those critical minerals and start providing even just the commodities into local and global supply chains. But, you know, as we move towards decarbonising and a net zero energy infrastructure, we need to start making some of that stuff here. At the moment, we rely on most of it for as an import, and that's a really high national security risk. If we're going towards like a net zero energy system and we don't make any of it, that's just a recipe for the disaster. So we need to change that very quickly. And so that's a big focus of what we're doing is working with local industry, value adding to critical minerals to build the supply chain in the first instance, because that's where there's a lot of global opportunity for export for us into those markets. There's good reasons why that market's getting more opportunistic for Australia. But if we're going to start making these products on continent, we need to build the supply chain first. So that's really where we're focusing at the moment.
Thanks for that, Joshua. And I would be very keen, and Reagan, I might, in your intro, maybe to touch on this, obviously from a very much from a place-based perspective on the application of technology and what that means. But for practically, what does that mean for people that say they want to get involved, or how we do this? Like, we know there's massive transition. We know battery energy storage is part of it. How do we go about that? So Reagan, maybe over to you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thanks very much, Chad, and thanks to Habib for the opportunity. TISB as an organisation discovered Habib and Chad's work about 2 months ago, so we're fairly early on, but we're representing an industry group today. I've just got a short PowerPoint to share with the participants. If you just let me know when you can see it.
That's good.
Great. I've got a slide in there that'll hopefully touch on some of our observations. So thanks again for the opportunity to present. In terms of our organisation, we're a not-for-profit industry group. We're based in southern Queensland. Toowoomba is home, with staff in Chinchilla. We're a membership-based industry organisation with over 500 commercial members, and we've been going for a dozen years. So the organisation was formed to sit between major project opportunity and regional development opportunity and the business community. So business leaders at the time saw it incredibly important to understand who are new players that are going to be operating through our region, which is better known as the Surat Basin or the Southern Res, and place a group of people as intermediaries or as people working between project buyers and project suppliers. So over the years, you can imagine the number of domestic and international firms that we've dealt with. So in terms of our tagline, we're absolutely the go-to organisation. We've worked hard to sort of place ourselves, and we pride ourselves on trying to get to new project opportunities, whether they be coal or coal seam gas, whether they be renewable, and start to talk about developers or original equipment manufacturers about how they get projects done. When we first met Habib, he spoke clearly about his ecosystem. We too have an ecosystem, but it's different from his in that ours relates to the business community that are involved in building out on an opportunity. So when local businesses get a chance to participate in major projects, they build and they capacity build and they grow in size. and they spend in our region, and that grows our town. So that's sort of the larger picture. Just finally on some of the purpose, the left-hand column there is the portfolio of work that we conduct in terms of energy and infrastructure. So certainly across the traditional and renewable topics, the value add streams of manufacturing, and then the construction that's involved in getting these projects done and established in regions are areas where we work between buyers and suppliers. And also too, we have our own industry cluster. Some on the call might be aware of the federal government's initiative to establish clusters across Australian regions. And we have the Southern Queensland Hydrogen Industry Institute, which looks after that portfolio of work. I won't talk today about experience in Central Queensland or North, because there's probably other people that can talk to that better. But in terms of the Southern Renewable Energy Zone, in the area that we work in, we conduct our own mapping, but again, it relates to suppliers of products and services to help major projects deliver their project. So I understand the mapping that Habib undertakes. Ours is more on the enterprise side or on the business side. But in terms of BESS, we've identified in this southern region, there's 21 projects in the pipeline with 4 delivered. And as some of you may well know, the approach of the developer and the designer, they've done containerised rollout, sort of 40-foot container offerings, but also under roof designs. But I wanted to raise some of the international firms that Habib's over, but you know, Samsung and Tesla are in the market, Honeywell and the Snyders and the Siemens, and all of these firms tend to be the ones at which change in design for the case of efficiency or convenience or social license is where the change tends to happen at that sort of design type phase. What we've realised in our region with so many operating solar farms, we have 7 operating solar farms and many under construction currently, is that the battery energy storage systems are the perfect component. And there would be very few projects out here that aren't now thinking about what a stage 2 looks like and what a stage 3 looks like. And that will be common across Queensland. So when we get a proponent developer over an area on the Western Downs, like let's say Hopeland, then they'll talk to us about their stage 1 development, which might be a large scale solar farm. They'll do a stage 2, which is expansion of the solar farm, and stage 3 is a battery project to store all that. And they're doing it, you know, the positive signs, they're increasing the efficiency of the existing systems and you know, net fuel reduction and decarbonising the use of diesel, you know, it is a byproduct of the expansion of this sector as well. We've become aware of the scalability in terms of some of the size of the projects and those topics there. Community batteries, we have a few in our region. Microgrids are becoming more common, and hybrid power generation. So sometimes the story with Queensland batteries isn't doing the whole hog straight up and the silver bullet, but it's a staged approach, and it appears to be scalable in terms of what the end user is looking for. And the batteries, of course, in our grid is a mature grid in terms of transmission and distribution. And so the batteries are providing some of the stability that also the coal stations and power stations are doing in our region as well. And I also just wanted to flag in terms of like stable supply that, you know, pumped hydro may well have a role to play in that across Queensland too. Just on our industry group that's been going for a dozen years, we undertake some reports and understandings. We pass those on as commercial offerings to our members. We do that mapping that I spoke about in terms of understanding how a project might get developed. But we spend a lot of time around procurement because interrupting the traditional procurement activities from foreign projects allows us to include local companies to compete for work. So We do a little around skilling, like if we have a mature industrial skills base out here, you'd expect that with the amount of industrial activity over many, many years. So we pose the question to them regarding what skills might look like in a new developing sector like hydrogen, for example. And finally, the other topic, incredibly important to our region and to economic development, is just to understand how we balance the coexistence between our traditional long-standing sectors that are thriving out here, and then, you know, the overlay of new technologies, which include, you know, energy products such as batteries. So hopefully that provides a bit of a initial overlay in terms of introduction.
Thanks for that, Reagan. Yeah, obviously your response touches on just it's a big and complex conversation that it is, but also the significant number of opportunities. And I like how you mentioned that it is a staged approach, like it's an ongoing, continuing conversation. You know, it's not just putting the batteries in, but then how do we make them more efficient? What are the other consequences? But it's a balanced coexistence. And then how do we get the workforce and skills, and also the role of the economic development organization, your TSB, I know GW3 is doing some amazing work, and you have the other, you know, advanced cans, and they're really doing that representation of the industry, and along, you know, shout out, of course, to the chambers that are out there too, with those smaller businesses that they're working with. And so it really is a concerted approach, and you guys are doing some really impressive work out there as well. I might just hop over to Catherine for a bit of introduction, and as kind of an industry body representative on you know, practically how we then navigate this moving forward, and maybe just some of the opportunities within the technology, Catherine, that you're seeing within the work that you do.
Thanks, Chad and Habib, for hosting this session. Really interesting discussion. And even though I said I had no slides, listening to Reagan talk makes me think, oh, there's one picture I'm going to show. So I'll do that now. So while I'm bringing that up, I'm the CEO for the Association for the Battery Recycling Industry. We have over 60 members from across the battery value chain. And this is why I thought I might share this diagram. Can you see that? Is that working? Great. To just put some context around, this is kind of a stylized version of the battery supply chain, if you like, and I'm going to talk to it in lead because it's such a great example, lead acid batteries, and you're manufacturing them in Queensland. You know, traditionally you get some feedstock, increasingly we're hoping this coming from recycled content, but raw materials too. You'll make the chemicals, maybe less so for lead, more so for lithium type batteries, make the cells, the systems, all that sort of bit, manufacture the battery and assemble it. And I've also put reuse in there, but I won't talk to that now. It'll go off to the sales channel. The sales channel then quite often becomes the end of life collection space. So they have two roles. In lead acid batteries, that works incredibly well. You know, you're taking the new batteries, pick up the old batteries, consolidate them and send them off to recycling, for example, in Wagga or Newcastle or Victoria. That lead will be recovered from those batteries and it will go back up to Queensland to go into new lead acid batteries. It's quite likely that your car battery has a very high content of recycled material in it. There's other parts of the chain, scrap and recycle, and then it will go back through to the actual processing part. So the ABRI members operate across all those different segments. ABRI's remit of influence is probably more from the sales and distribution end of life through to the reclamation of raw materials is kind of our area of focus. Traditionally, as I talked about that lead acid battery, it was just a really neat little circle. It just went from each individual economic actor around the chain, batteries got passed on, collected, reused. What we're seeing now, lithium's our big growth area for the moment, is there's much greater interaction of relationships. So you'll see now the lithium recyclers will have direct commercial relationships with the automotive sector or the energy storage OEMs, because they're all looking at reclaiming the critical minerals and materials from those batteries, because recycled content policy globally is driving changes. It's critical, as Josh has alluded to this, supply chain security, critical mineral security, all those sort of factors are seeing a whole lot of different working relationships emerge. Clearly that challenge for us moving into the future and looking at what's happening in Queensland is how will this work for products like vanadium batteries, all those other types of batteries that aren't kind of mainstream, if you like, at the moment. But governments are working very hard to make sure they do become mainstream and locally produced into the future. The challenges for us, so this is a very broad topic depending on which kind of chemistry you want to focus on. I will focus a little bit on lithium today just because it's kind of the prevalent technology. And there's a lot happening in Queensland in this space at the moment. There's a number of companies looking at investing in recycling capacity in Queensland. There's a lot of work happening at various Queensland universities, QUT, Griffith, University of Southern Queensland, on various processes to either make the recovery of the minerals more sustainable, or they're looking at policy or other initiatives about how to accelerate the supply chain and obviously take advantage locally. There's also work happening in what I call secondary industries. And this to me is the great growth opportunity because there is so much now happening in the hydromet minerals recovery sector. What a manufacturing of containers look like for safe storage and transport? What are the rules around safe storage and transport for handling of lithium batteries? How are all those projects that Reagan talked about going to manage end-of-life batteries? What are the opportunities for the regional areas, either in sort of partial processing or disassembling of those batteries or remanufacturing or reusing those lithium batteries, particularly the big mining equipment? So there's a whole lot of work happening in that space, safety, fire risk management, other really key interesting areas for the industry as lithium batteries get rolled out at scale. The other key things we see driving, so if you think about a renewable project, all the OEMs, there's a lot of government work, and this includes the Queensland government at the moment. And they'll talk about it at the Environment Ministers meeting in December. What should there be mandatory producer responsibility for these batteries? And if so, how will that be implemented and how will that work? Now, the focus at the moment might be on smaller consumer batteries, given the challenges to the waste sector and the fires it's causing in that space. But I would expect it will very quickly roll out to consumer batteries, be that portable recreational vehicle, marine batteries, that sort of size batteries, which you might be familiar with if you do off-road camping, that sort of thing, to household energy storage. And then the grid scale is a whole nother challenge again. I think Regan alluded to a 40-foot container. Those batteries can be up to 60 tons. How do you handle, manage, disassemble, store those batteries? The other key drivers we see, greenwashing is becoming increasingly prevalent, and there's new corporate financial reportability, sustainability and reporting requirements starting in January next year. That is for the larger corporates, like big listed companies and that sort of thing. But it has flow-on impacts down the entire supply chain as the recyclers, which lithium battery recyclers are not in that reporting category at this stage, but they're thinking about how do they help those companies deliver against those commitments. Reclaiming materials from recycled batteries, much less greenhouse gas emissions. The Battery Stewardship Scheme did a report, life cycle analysis, just to give you some figures. Producing a lithium battery from primary materials is about 18.6 kilograms of CO2 versus 8.1 kilograms of CO2 from producing the batteries from secondary materials. So there's a lot happening in this space, but I also think, again, a lot of opportunities. We're trying to look at a project with Western Australia, but Queensland would be equally good to do the project in, looking at those the mining sector as it decarbonises, and how can it support regional communities with its battery recycling needs. And you've quite often got co-located renewable energy zones as well. So they'll have very large volumes of batteries. Some of those batteries won't have a shorter shelf life if it's mining equipment that's fleet and vehicles, just because of the tough conditions. And you're going to start needing solutions pretty soon for those types of batteries. But therefore, also, how can you support the surrounding community? So I think it's a really great great time to be in this space. There's a lot happening. And then, as I say, what's the future for things like vanadium or sodium ion or some of those newer battery technologies, which we know will come down the pipeline, but aren't quite at volume yet. Thanks, Chad.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Catherine. And yeah, I mean, clearly the excitement around some of the secondary industries, as you mentioned, some of the waste, and you really highlighted. I like how you touched on each of the segments of the opportunities, which we're going to segue into next. From whether, because conscious of the people in the webinar here and the ones that will be hearing about after come from all sorts of different perspectives. Say from the market, your innovators, your entrepreneurs coming up with new technology, or your corporates in your major industry doing the transformation. You've got your regulatory and reform, both inhibitors and enablers from the government policy. You've got your researchers, people struggling with place-based transition. What does that mean? And even you kind of touched on the legal aspect, and we always talk about, AI taking over the legal services, but it's a massive opportunity for people in the professional services to get involved in this space. And I also like how you mentioned a bit of a healthy competition between states on working together. And I was reading an article in the Fin Review today about the new administration in the US and how that might be an opportunity for us if they do take their foot off the pedal over there a bit in some of the decarbonization technologies and opportunities here. If you are in the chat, please feel free to introduce yourself, ask any questions that come through. I do see Leonard. Thank you very much, from the Commonwealth Government funded Powering Australia Industry Growth Centre, and his details are in there. If you want to touch base with him, Andrew from the Queensland Policy Manager for Australian Energy Producers is in there. Colin Graham from the Sunny Coast, I know a long-time innovator and entrepreneur support leader in there. So there's heaps of wisdom in the room, as they say. Feel free to put your questions in there as we continue forward. I see a few people raising their hand, but if you can just maybe throw your question in the chat, we'll be able to get to that. That would be great. Or feel free to throw it in the Q&A in between Habib and I. We can respond in there. So I'm going to go around the panelists again. And if we can look to the future and look at maybe some of those categories, whatever you think excites you the most as far as what is the opportunity for energy storage, particularly within Queensland. And maybe there's something that makes Queensland unique as far as what might be the potential, the opportunity, whether it's from the market perspective on new ideas, innovators, entrepreneurs, from the existing establishment of corporates and major industry, regulatory reform and enablers. And I know, Joshua, you touched a little bit on that one. Opportunities for research. We know we can't get to our targets without coming up with something that we haven't even thought of yet. Anything to do with place-based transition, or even the legal and accounting side, or something I haven't thought of. So I might just go around again, and Josh, maybe touch base with you on maybe some of the opportunities as we look forward.
Yeah, for sure. I might actually just share some slides, because I have some slides that talk to that. If I can work out how to share in this environment. There it is. Is that in the full screen view? Good. Yeah, cool. Yeah, so plenty of opportunities in the space for sure, and there's some good reasons around that. The world is obviously rushing to net zero and decarbonize, and there's a lot of effort happening in other nations to fortify their own supply chains and their own energy security. And they're looking to do that with trusted trade partners. Australia's in a really good position in that space to be able to supply like those value-added commodities into battery supply chains, because we've got a large amount of the critical minerals. We've got over 50% of the lithium, over 50% of the cobalt. Like, we've got so much of the raw materials that are needed that go into huge amounts of iron, right, to support the steel industry that's needed to build in the renewable energy infrastructure. So we've got all of the raw critical minerals here, and we've also got very good trusted partners with a lot of these larger nations. So there's a really good opportunity for us, because we're so close to the critical minerals. We've got an abundance of renewable energy here, which means we can build in renewable energy into the manufacturing process to increase the ESG of the products. And so it's not really becoming a global market driver yet, but it will in the future for sure. And in Europe, it's starting to be more and more important around provenance and ESG. So the fact that we've got the critical minerals, we've got good ethical ways of pulling them out of the ground, and we've got abundance of renewable energy, you combine that together and we have very high ESG products. So there's a really good opportunity for us to then supply into these global supply chains that are looking for more and more higher ESG and really are trying to diversify their supply chains to be able to have other sources of access. And that includes the critical minerals too, but the real opportunity for us is to value add to those critical minerals before we ship them out. And that includes doing the refining. So, I mean, the Accenture report that came out a while ago, it's a bit outdated now, but, you know, it estimated what I've got on the screen about, you know, 16.9 billion value adds, a lot more than that, and a huge amount of jobs. And it's across the whole supply chain. There's a really good reason why we should do this as well. And as I said before, it's around our energy security. So inside that, we've got good opportunities to work with research institutions to make better products, make better commodities, you know, build in research innovation into those things and really innovate across the supply chain. So a big focus of what our research group focus on is improved safety in the products, and that's really important driver for promoting adoption as well. There's a lot of stigma around safety in batteries because they can, if not properly managed and engineered and with all the right components in them, you know, can catch fire and do have issues there. But a lot of the issues we're seeing, the majority of the issues we're seeing with fires is e-mobility devices and smaller things where they don't have that scrutiny and quality of engineering and design around the battery management systems and things. So batteries are inherently safe, lithium batteries, when the appropriate engineering is put in place. But there's still all sorts of things you can do at the materials level to improve the performance. So we work with a lot of industry partners like Lava Blue, Alpha HPA, and others that are Queensland-based companies that are building the supply chain, pumping out high purity alumina, which can go into battery products to improve safety. But there's another piece to that, as you go further down the supply chain, there's opportunities for export, obviously, but we want to build our own supply chain and build in our own energy security and start manufacturing critical renewable technologies that we need for our electricity needs as well. So there's a really important piece there of working across the entire supply chain, looking at the circular economy piece, making sure we're factoring in reuse to recycling, but also making sure that we're targeting products that we need. So that means working with the end users from the start and bringing them into the equation. You know, what are your energy storage needs? What technologies do you need? Where are the gaps? What do you see what do you see you procuring in the future to meet the transition needs? And so that's really important that we connect, we go downstream and upstream and connect in the middle to make sure that we're focusing and targeting on the right things. And it's really critical to do that, you know, because the startup companies, SMEs that are starting to do this value add, and we need to make sure that they've got somewhere to sell their products into. And there's certain markets that are very difficult to sell into because there's very tight profit margins, and there's other global nations that are very mature and can produce these products at a much cheaper cost. So it's important that when we start moving downstream to build in security into these companies, that they can have that security supply, that we build in the offtake with them early, make sure that the products they're focusing on we have need for and they're commercially viable, they work. I'll talk about that in a bit as well, and make sure that there's an end user for the products already in place to guarantee that these companies will have a secure supply and can keep their doors open and have that revenue stream in place to make them sustainable. So a big part of that then is doing the technology validation downstream. So there's global race, billions and billions, trillions of dollars being spent on energy storage. There's stuff that, you know, low TRL, high TRL, we need to focus on all of it, but what we need right now to meet net zero targets is stuff that works. So we really need to make sure that we've got the ability domestically on continent to verify technology, to make sure that the end users, and these, when I say end users, I'm mainly talking about the large energy companies that are building the renewable energy infrastructure into our grids, but also the residential storage and other uses, but definitely the bigger companies. They need to know that the products that they're going to procure or looking at work. And because there's so much new technology coming down the pipeline, these energy companies, end users, find it very difficult to navigate that haze of technology and as to what's at the right TRL level, what works for their use case, for their application. And, you know, there's no one battery technology or chemistry or type that's going to win. You know, there's no winner. We need all batteries. All different batteries have different sweet spots where they operate. You know, redox flow batteries are really good for long duration, large scale technology. Lithium batteries are really good for shorter duration, high power, high efficiency, low maintenance. You know, all of these technologies have their different sweet spots, and we need all of them to operate harmoniously, and make the real trick is making sure the end users are applying the right technology for the right application to maximize the life of the asset, because that's what comes down. Part of the adoption barriers is the economics of it, and does this make sense for the end users, for their business case? And so it's really important that they are then buying the right technology for the right application, and that's why that testing and TRL validation part of it is really, really important to promote the adoption and making sure that we're targeting the right types of technologies. So at QT in the Energy Storage Research Group, we've got basically a completely vertically integrated battery value chain where we do everything. We can even do the raw materials refining to a degree, and we do a lot of minerals exploration as well. But we can then value add to those critical minerals, refine chemicals to make whatever it is we need to do. We can do everything across flow battery electrolytes to battery active materials, anodes, membrane separators, electrolytes. And then we can take those and we can put those into cells and make the cells at prototype level up to a commercial quality cell, and support partners to do that TRL scaling. And then we can do all of the testing that's required across the whole supply chain, all the way up to large scale grid testing. And that's really important as well, to be able to test the turnkey products to promote the adoption of the technology and doing that validation side of things. It's a huge piece in there around training and skills development, which we're lacking in at the moment. And if we're going to, you know, build these industries, we need to make sure that we're training the people to meet that demand. And currently we're lacking in that space. So this is a quick snapshot of the process of doing the material synthesis, building it into the cells, doing the early small scale testing, prototyping, scaling the cells up from coin cells to pouch cells to commercial cells, and then all of the testing that's required across that. And there's a huge amount of testing. This is what I'm trying to accentuate, I guess, is to meet these opportunities that we have to do the value add to the materials and the systems and the cells. We need to test, and we need to test in large quantities, because the battery development cycle requires that you test tens of thousands of cells, you know, to build the statistics and prove out the performance before you can get them to market. And that's like before you're even selling a product. So there's a huge amount of support that's required for these partners and SMEs to be able to enter the supply chain, to validate their materials or their products, to get their revenue streams in place. And that needs to be a centralized supporting service, because the cost of the equipment and the capital that's required to build in that testing infrastructure, the SMEs can't afford it. So they need to be able to access that by a third party. And the third party testing needs to be done separately from the entity as well. And that enables the companies to attract investment, whether that's government or private, because they've been validated by an external entity. If you've got your own internal validation done, you know, the investors and that, they can't trust that. They need it third party validated. And that's why that separate entity is really important to get products to market. Again, this is the large scale testing validation. So we've got a battery testing microgrid here where we can test the largest systems. That includes the power conversion systems and the control systems integration, which is really critical, because that's all a part of the battery system. So there's another part there that's part of the validation. It's not just the system, it's also the power conversion system and the control systems and how it talks to the grid. And a lot of the testing and deployment we've done, it's not the battery that causes the issue, it's the power conversion system or the communication system that breaks down. And so there's a lot of early deployment, pre-deployment work. You need to prove out the control system and the power conversion systems to make sure that they're stable before they go out into the real world. I spoke about the safety, really important part. There's a huge amount of innovation we can build in at that point to the products that we are looking to export and manufacture. Again, just a snapshot of some of the future battery industry CRCs projects we're delivering at the moment. They're all winding down now, end of this year and early next year. But again, across the whole supply chain, building on the advanced battery facility. And then we've got a new CRC now coming through the pipeline. It's gone through stage 2. It's about $300 million CRC program that we're currently off to Canberra in December to pitch for as part of the final process. But that does everything that I spoke about. It's building that energy security, building the supply chain, but making sure that we're working with the end users to get the adoption in place, the offtake in place, and focus on the right technologies. And again, a project we're delivering at the moment with the Queensland government, focused on supply chain building. So that's across all the different battery technologies, but again, really focused on the technology validation and testing to support partners to get their products to market, but focusing on a diverse range of energy storage solutions to make sure that we've got the right technologies for the right application being eventually manufactured in Australia. Yeah, that's it for me. Hopefully that answered the question.
Oh, that's good, Joshua. Yeah, look, incredible capability and opportunity in there, and also speaking to some of the upstream and downstream opportunities, like you say, it's not necessarily the battery itself. Obviously, there's a lot of emphasis in how we produce some minerals out of the ground, things like that. But it is the communication. It's a lot of the other types of technology that people are developing that can be adapted to this wonderful opportunity around decarbonization. We want to give a couple of quick shout outs to other people that are just popping their heads up in the chat. Mohammed Sanjari from Griffith University, working on the areas around power system optimization, battery integration into the grid, an important component in there. And Sean, thanks for putting that link in there for TAPE Queensland Center of Excellence around clean energy and batteries. That's really great. So if anybody else has any questions, please feel free to put in the chat. I do see people raising their hand, but we'll be responding to any questions either through chat or Q&A. And Reagan, as we head over to you, I also want to throw in Andrew Barter's question here, where he says Queensland now has something like 120 gigawatt size hole in our energy transition with the cancellation of the Pioneer Burdekin Pumped Hydro project. Is this an opportunity to look at less centralized storage solutions with a greater diversity of storage technologies? And I'm reflecting on what Joshua was saying in terms of, look, they need to be reliable, we need trust in order to get there, but that's almost antithetical to maybe some of the fail fast startup type approaches. How do we manage that tension, Reagan? And is there an opportunity around some of the more diversification, even communication of some of the energy grids that we've been exploring? What does that really look like? And what do you see as some of the other opportunities in addition to, or maybe apart from that, Reagan?
Yeah, sure. No, I think so. I'd be a bit of an advocate for pumped hydro, just in terms of it's a large scale solution for energy stability. And so we can talk about batteries, and batteries will form. Many batteries will go into providing the same amount of sophistication in terms of storage as what a pumped hydro system would. So I think it's going to take all energies myself. And if it isn't Pioneer Burdekin, then around Queensland, there have to be other opportunities in terms of large scale, pumped hydro storage. My point regarding evidence that, every stage 1 project has a stage 2 and a stage 3, it would be fascinating to review what the number of deployed large-scale battery projects and what is proposed in 12 months' time. So if I'm to revisit that figure in 12 months' time, it's 21 currently. So just for the southern just for this southern area of Queensland, if we were to revisit that in 12 months' time, what will that number look like? So to Josh's point, the key to success here is absolutely keeping the end user as close as possible to all the work that's going on. So whether it be developing ecosystems, whether it be bettering research, whether it be providing stimulus to the private sector or the government sector to build out these batteries, if we've got the end users, the OEMs at the table, then in Europe, they partner incredibly well to bring about outcomes in terms of efficiency, faster, better, more recyclable. So I don't know enough about it in Australia, but I'd like us to mirror some of the efforts that these OEMs really partner well in Europe. So yeah, my answer to your question is more of the same in the short term, and I think, I do think pumped hydro will take some of the heat out of regions full of batteries. There is only so much a region is prepared to have in terms of the saturation of development, and lots of localized, large scale batteries. There will certainly be some objections to that. So I think a balanced view to bigger storage is important.
Thanks, Reagan. And yeah, unfortunately, there's not like one massive silver bullet coming from a big gun that we can say, look, let's solve this. But that also then creates some pretty significant opportunities. I do just want to also give a quick shout out to Quentin Hill, who from the Advanced Materials and Battery Council, and Quentin, thank you for that comment on supporting from the technology mapping, and Habib and I can connect with you, and their signature event, Australia Battery Day. is on next week at St. Lucia. So make sure everybody puts that in their diary, and the link to that is in the chat. We'll put it in the webinar notes after this. Reagan, you mentioned an interesting thing is also as far as the better involvement of the OEMs and how we, collaboration, very easy to say, but how do we actually make that happen? I might just lead into Catherine's opportunity prospectus there. Maybe Catherine, if you can maybe touch on that as well, as far as what you've seen as far as the greater collaboration opportunities, particularly within industry and the field that you're in, and any other opportunities that you've seen moving forward.
Sorry, just trying to think through. There's a lot of collaboration going on at the moment, as I said, was that commercial chain, well, for the recycling sector or end of life through to raw materials recovery, collaboration happening because the commercial relationships are changing quite a lot with the new battery technologies coming in. And the second part of this, as I say, policy on OEMs is also driving much more thought about what happens to their products after end of life, how do they track them? There's discussions, it's still very much early days, batteries as a service in your electric vehicle fleet. How is all of that going to play out? I mean, even when you think of your EV, right, that whole relationship, if you've got a car that's battery as a service, or the battery becomes replaceable, put one in, take one out, and they're talking about certainly some of that for heavy vehicles. That's really seeing relationships change across the field and how people interact, but also, again, opportunities, right? So what does that mean for the automotive service sector and skills and training? And I see Sean from TAFE Queensland's online, which is great because we're starting to do some projects with them. But also, a lot of the actual recycling technologies, so the recovery of the critical minerals from the powder that comes out of the lithium cells, which is known as black mass, that's all mining sector technology, right? I mean, yes, it's being adapted and changed, but essentially you're getting the minerals out of the battery or minerals out of the ground. There's a lot of things happening in that space, and there's 3 companies at the moment, one of whom has links in to Queensland, that they're exporting that technology. They're exporting the technology now, right, to Europe. So the European OEMs are looking at using technology developed here with Australian universities. So it's kind of, the world's changing a bit, where you just used to get the car battery at end of life, never really dealt with anyone else in the chain, and off you went, to a lot more collaboration happening. Renewable space, again, is another one where you're seeing a lot more cross-pollination of ideas. PVs as well. So we do a lot of work with the Circular PV Alliance, because there's going to be interactions where those batteries touch on that channel. So again, thinking about home energy storage, I'm up in Queensland on Friday, looking at if you start using installers, electricians to collect both PVs and batteries at end of life from households, how does that look? How does that interact with the scrap sector? How do all those chains do it safely? What rules need to change? That's looking at smaller batteries, right? But again, if you scale that up to grid scale, where do you have natural rub points and you can work together? And you might still go separate directions, but there's a lot of collaboration happening.
Yeah, thanks for that, Catherine. You really raised a really interesting point in terms of, like, it is this, the tradies working on, for your house or the cars, and how do they get rid of it? It's safely, but it's also simply, it's not just doing it once, but it's doing it, a lot, and making it just so it's like secondhand knowledge. It's, look at the regular paper recycling and how far we've come from, what used to be a bit of a hassle, and now we're just trying to make it as ubiquitous as possible. And how do we do the same thing with batteries? Like, it's really interesting. I might, given the time we have left, I'm going to just quickly hop on, do a quick show and tell of some of the mapping work that we've been doing, with heaps of caveats in there. Maybe pop up a bit real quick just to add any additional comments onto that. And then we'll come back for a real quick round the room just on final comments. So I'm just going to share screen real quick. Within the Queensland Decarbonisation Hub, within the technology and innovation mapping theme, we have been creating a mapping platform, and effectively, at face value on the front end, it is just a bit of a directory, if you will. but in the back end, we are linking all the different actors together, linking the policies with the organizations that are involved, and really wanting to get a bit more of that network, social network graph embedded. So that technology is there in the back end. In the front end, for this first pass, we're just having a very simple directory type view. You can search for certain things or select certain technologies. So, for example, advanced energy storage system, which is the conversation we're having now. And then for any one of those, you have additional sub technologies or sub tags afterwards. Shows you where they are in Australia. Obviously, an emphasis on Queensland. We do show all of Australia because we recognize that, you know, as a nation, we're big in geography, small in population, and so somebody's going to be probably acting in multiple areas. And then any one of these, we can see additional aspects about them if we click on the tag there. And then underneath, we can see additional the logos for the organizations grouped in different ways. This one's grouped by the different technologies. Click on those, you can see a bit more information. So really, we're just trying to get a view of saying, for the particular conversation around a vertical within decarbonization technology, here's the support ecosystem, as it were. Here's the technology providers that might be involved, and here's the policies that might be relevant. And you can see from different funding or opportunities, both at the national and state level, and anything maybe that's cross-state from others that might be able to affect us. I see some details there. So this will be with a link from the public website. Right now, you can go to it by decarb-hub.org/innovation. And we're getting some links to it further up, and then populating this a bit more. There will be things missing on this, or things that you want it to do and say, hey, what about this? Or how come this isn't categorized this way, or whatever. Please give us the feedback through the website. There'll be things missing that are embarrassingly so. So please let us know, because as soon as you do, that will no longer be the case, and we'll continue to co-create it together. So that's a bit of the overview, but one of the person to thank, not just for populating a lot of that and supporting it, but also the fact that we're all here around a Zoom and pull this webinar together. I might hand over to Habib real quick to maybe get some of your thoughts, reflecting on the conversation we've had today and what that means as you've been populating it. Is there anything that's coming top of mind for you?
Oh, thank you, Chad, and thank you Queensland Decarbonization Hub for giving us the opportunity to map these ecosystem across energy storage and decarbonization technologies. And when I was hearing all the thoughts from Kath and Josh and Regan, and and it says that collaboration is happening, and there has been an increased collaboration going on between technology providers and commercial operators regarding these technologies. But what my initial thoughts are, like, there is enhanced collaboration, but there is sort of like general public view regarding that, to whom we can connect, like, for example, in Gold Coast or in Toowoomba or in any place, to whom we can connect, to where we can go, and which one we can talk about this specific technology, like in agriculture, like these solar panels, we can go and talk to someone. So I think the idea and a perspective from my side is like there is a lot of information, and there are a lot of maps available on the Queensland government website, but it's about like the projects which are happening across different regions, and it's about the activities that are happening across different areas in Queensland. But the policies levels and the policy frameworks regarding those projects, and which organization, which technology provider, which support organization, our network is there, that I can go and talk to them. So probably that's what I was feeling, and I think there's a lot of missing components in the current map system, like in the mapping tool. But as Chad mentioned, like, we need to build that of connections, and that's what my initial thoughts were, and that information was not easily available. So that's what I'm trying at the moment, to like going into different databases and going into different policies and bringing that information and connecting it to it in the ecosystem. And Josh, maybe I really get a lot of help from that database that has been developed by ICM for the battery value chain, and that Excel sheet, like where we can get information and to whom we can connect. So probably that's sort of like that initial start from that Excel sheet and coming to a more connected interface for the decarbonization technology is really an important step for us to develop and foster that collaboration.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Habib. Yeah, just the people that are operating the space, the data that they've made available online. It's been absolutely invaluable. Huge shout of thank you. Quentin, I'm sure we're going to be reaching out to you and be able to collaborate there. And even in the chat, I see where Dinesh is saying, hey, what about the viability for setting up a pilot battery recycling? Catherine's right in there saying, well, here's my email address. Let's make it go. And if, in 12 months time, Dinesh is the latest recycling battery entrepreneur setting up something new, then this whole conversation would have been well worth it. That's probably what we're trying to do, just provide that clarity, who's who in the zoo, where does it all connect to, and then providing the connection so that we can build capability, capacity to drive things forward. I'm going to go around the room real quick, and what I'd love to do is for each of the panelists, if you have one, 30-second to 90-second shout out plug for what you're doing on how people can connect with you and how we can work together with you. But effectively, how can we help? So what are you working on? How can we help you do what you do better? And what's your ask? So quick 30-90-second pitch. Josh, might start with you.
Sorry, mate. What was the pitch about again? Sorry, I missed the
Yeah,
first
just
bit.
how can we help? What's if we could do one thing to help you and you do what you do, what would that be
Okay.
as the ecosystem?
And sorry, Chad, before Josh, maybe just a quick question on our interface. What you can think of adding in our interface can add value for general public about our decarbonization technologies.
Yeah. Thanks, David.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. I have to digest that one for a second. Look, I think I'd have to reiterate the importance of collaboration, right? So networking and bringing people together, bringing partners together that have like-minded interests, or especially talking to the supply chain, people who are looking to or have the capability in the future maybe pivot and focus towards manufacturing or producing different parts of the supply chain. Bringing those people together to eventually sort of fill the gaps and collaborate and start producing complete products and systems. I think there's a really good opportunity for us to do that, and that really requires good networking, good collaboration, and I guess a keen focus on where the opportunities are downstream, and how we can network and coordinate the partners to work together. And that's where the federal government's cooperative research centre program is quite good because that's exactly what it does, is it promotes collaboration and across the sector. I just probably should hammer home that. So anything that the Decarbonisation Hub can do to support that, and you guys already do that really well.
So thanks for that, Josh. Reagan.
Yeah, so for me, the takeaway for me from today is the absolute recognition that there is a very mature value stream, both upstream and downstream, in terms of their contributions from the speakers today. These are high value added opportunities. So whether they be for a worker, whether they be for dividends, for communities, whether they be for miners who are thinking about their precious metal opportunity, these are high value topics. And so I think the takeaway from our point of view is being firm with government that this transformation could do with some incentivation to allow the well-paying, highly technical jobs and the sophisticated supply chains who've done it before with other sectors, but would like to do it with the battery sector to get them involved. So I see a flow of high quality interaction from downstream all the way to upstream. So the kinds of activities that we'd like to be involved with is a little bit more influencing on policy setting, and being clear with the state government regarding regions' dividends could be in high value adding batteries, and whether that be recycling them or constructing them or manufacturing them or whatever it might be, regions will benefit from a sector that's sophisticated in its nature. All we need to do is transform it.
Thanks, Reagan. Catherine.
Be quick. So Reagan, we're definitely interested in what we can do in the regions, bringing together the renewable energy zones and mining sector who have large volumes of batteries, and then how do we support the smaller players like households in those areas deliver recycling solutions and safe and sustainable. And then the second thing, really interested in doing anyone who can help with some of those reverse logistics challenges, particularly around lithium batteries, transport costs and logistics challenges are quite often one of the more major challenges for recycling lithium batteries. Well, I mean, the processes can be improved, yes, but it's not the bottleneck, if you like, at the moment. And so thanks.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Catherine. And thank you very much to the panelists. Thank you for those who are attending in the webinar. It's been an amazing conversation. Really appreciate it. And yeah, I definitely look forward to seeing what some of the collaboration and the opportunities and the connections that we can have from here on out. Thank you all.
Thank you.